Sometimes in a game of Commander, you have the finish line in sight. The other players are desperately trying to catch up to you as you fly way far ahead, slinging removal spells your way, banding together, and all of it is for naught. Your army, your combo, your engine, it's all untouchable. Without interruption, winning is an inevitability. This is not a video about those times. This is about being the other player. Statistically speaking, due to Commander being a format of 4 players, you will be behind the leader 75% of the time. Even worse, 25% of the time, you're going to be hopelessly outmatched, sitting in last place. None of your cards come to you in the right order, and apathy begins to set in. But you know there's a chance, maybe as little as 1-2%. If you hope hard enough, maybe you can manifest it, that the next card on top of your library will save you. You don't need an answer, you need the answer. Not a silver bullet, but a silver nova, one that sweeps away the world until all is even and clean, back to square one. A fresh start. When you're desperately lost, sometimes what you need is to wipe the board and start over. Sorry to get dramatic, but I love the narrative of board wipes. The power to end a world is such a vivid and classic fantasy, and Wizards of the Coast also plays into this, naming cards things like Wrath of God, Ruinous Ultimatum, Planar Cleansing, and these cards match in gameplay what they promise in name. 4 to 8 mana seems like a lot in isolation, especially compared to cheap targeted removal, but when you factor in the sheer number of permanents you'll be affecting, the math works out that you're going to get a seriously great deal compared to casting 18 Doomblades. It also helps that they are extremely good in the later turns when games can be decided out of nowhere. Decimating the permanents in play can, believe it or not, really shake up players who are making tight calculations on how they're going to attempt to win next turn. That's why it's so important that your board wipes be potent. Nothing ruins the moment more than when you declare that you are reigning in the end times, and the table responds with a despondent, okay, that doesn't really affect me, go for it. Hopefully this video will help you find some of the things to look for in a premium sweeper. First, let's talk about flexibility. Gone are the days of just slamming Wrath of God and Damnation into a deck and then calling it a job well done. Creatures, although usually your prime concern when making calculations on how to survive, are not the only things worth worrying about at the table. The One Ring, Rhystic Study, Smothering Tithe, the current Commander Zeitgeist is full of potent and scary non-creature permanents that will keep your opponents in the winning positions after a conventional board wipe resolves. A flexible board wipe can take care of many, or all, permanent types at the same time. Cleansing Nova is my go-to example of this idea. You can take out all creatures or instead opt for artifacts and enchantments. Neither the front line nor the back row is safe in the face of a Nova. Merciless Eviction divides artifacts and enchantments into different options, but also adds planeswalkers into the mix and tacks on some exile instead of destruction. Austere Command, my beloved, lets you hit any 2 of artifacts, enchantments, big creatures, or small creatures. This can often be practically one-sided depending on the mana cost of the creatures on the board. Speaking of one-sided, the almighty Cyclonic Rift bounces all your opponent's non-land permanents and can be used at instant speed. Not to mention it can do an impression of spot removal. Its little brother, Filter Out, bounces all non-creature non-lands the same way, is also an instant, and only sets you back 3 mana. If you want to get tricky and use an ability, Dismantling Wave cycles to destroy all artifacts and enchantments, and can't be countered unless someone is packing a Stifle effect. Akroma's Vengeance destroys creatures, artifacts, and enchantments, while also having a cycling option to replace itself if it arrives at an inconvenient time, such as cluttering an otherwise appetizing opening hand. Devastating Mastery destroys every non-land permanent for when you need to be especially thorough, and has a smaller mode you can cast if you want to team up with an opponent or simply can't spare the 6 mana. If you find that card compelling, Planar Cleansing is the same effect and the same mana cost, but it lacks the baby mode in case you don't have enough mana to spend on it. Ruinous Ultimatum, God what a name, is the end-all be-all. Destroy all non-land permanents your opponents control. One-sided, absolute destruction. It's probably one of the best reasons to be playing Mardu. If it's pesky lands that are giving you trouble, but you don't want to be the guy running mass land destruction, Blood Moon and his lesser-known blue equivalent, Harbinger of the Seas, turn non-basic lands into mountains or islands respectively. Both are excellent ways to shut off a Dark Depths or Field of the Dead. But having the ability to answer multiple card types isn't everything. Sometimes it's more important to hit certain types more forcefully. Uh-oh, hang on. You may have noticed an issue in the previous section. The One Ring was mentioned, but he has indestructible. There are a great many threats nowadays that do not die to destroy clauses, and a robust removal package requires that you're able to deal with these permanents as well. Toxic Deluge is a classic. If you don't know, the card gives all creatures -X/-X until end of turn, and you pay X life. It's not only a cheap wrath mana-wise, it's 3 mana, but also the -X/-X will take out all creatures with indestructible as well. Meathead Massacre works on a similar axis, but you pay mana as opposed to life. That may sound strictly worse than the previous card, but you also get a little bit of ongoing life drain for your trouble. Final Judgment simply exiles all creatures. Clean, straightforward, and effective, whereas Blasphemous Edict makes everyone sacrifice 13 of them. This may not catch everything, especially if there's a token player, but it often catches plenty for just 1 black mana. Both of these clauses get around indestructible. So does Terminus, putting everyone's creatures on the bottom of their libraries. This one especially lives out the underdog dream, since if you top deck it at the beginning of your turn, you can play it for just 1 white mana. Final Showdown is a spell with Spree, letting you pick multiple options. For 8 mana total, you can get rid of all creatures' abilities, like Indestructible, give your own creature Indestructible, and then wipe the board. It also can't be understated how nice it is that this is an instant, since untapping immediately with your valuable commander and a slew of mana while everyone else still has a clear board is very, very satisfying. Simic, believe it or not, actually gets one of these too. Oversimplify. For 5 mana, it exiles all creatures, then has everyone make a fractal token whose stats are equal to the total power of creatures they lost. Then comes my 2 personal favorites. Tragic Arrogance is a beating. You get to choose a creature, enchantment, artifact, and planeswalker for each player. Then everything you didn't choose is sacrificed. Beats Indestructible, lets you leave everyone with their worst of each permanent type, while you keep all of your best. And for only 5 mana, 1 more than the going rate for Wrath of God. Also, it uses the language choose, not target, so you can select bad hexproof creatures to remain after the world ends. Alright, now time for the card you all knew was coming. Farewell is the Kingpin, the final word, the answer every other answer wishes it could be. When you absolutely cannot let anything remain, Farewell has your back. Choose 1 or more, exile all creatures, artifacts, enchantments, graveyards. Very little in the game can actually survive this, and 6 mana is a small price to pay for the board state to go immediately back to 0. But sometimes you'd rather your wraths contribute to your board rather than just harm those of others. If getting ahead is the ultimate goal here, leaving some of your opponent's things untouched in favor of pushing yourself forward can be a tactical move. Martial Coup is 2 white and X, it makes you X/1/1 tokens, and if X is 5 or greater, you then destroy all other creatures. This is also true of White Sun Zenith, letting your army in a can arrive to an empty battlefield. Azuri's Predation makes a ton of 4/4s for you, triggering many green enchantments in a huge burst as they enter the battlefield, and then they all fight other creatures, triggering enrages and other on-damage abilities. Culling Ritual is popular in CEDH, but it deserves consideration in casual as well. It destroys small permanents and generates you green or black mana for each one destroyed, fueling massive X spells like Villainous Wealth. Fumigate can gain you a huge heap of life out of nowhere if the board is cluttered. If you'd prefer to keep your tchotchkes around, Kindred Dominance lets your creatures survive, assuming that they all share a creature type with each other. If they don't, that's okay. Winds of Wrath misses creatures who are enchanted, freeing up the board for a Voltron commander to swing with impunity. Decree of Pain is a classic. It's a whole 8 mana, but it's a creature sweeper that draws you a card for each creature it destroys when it resolves. Profiteering never felt so good. A lot of these cards compete directly with each other for slots in a deck though, and that's mostly an issue with color. By this point in the discussion, it is painfully obvious that there is a discrepancy in the ability of different colors to wipe the board. White and black have much better credentials for this category than the other 3 colors, and it's no contest. More flexible, more robust, and more numbers of board wipes are offered to them, whereas blue, red, and green lack these and thus struggle here. Don't get me wrong, there are certainly options for these colors, but unfortunately, because of how the game is designed, I have to advise you that if you are in a multicolored strategy that happens to include white or black, you should probably consider leaning into one of those 2 for your board wipes. Okay, with that out of the way, let's talk blue. Blue mostly gets its board wipes in the form of Mass Bounce, and this is pretty good. Although not as permanent as the Orzhov cards, the aforementioned Cyclonic Rift, as well as Aetherize and Devastation Tide, give you Mass Bounce options to fill out your slots. Sending everyone back into rebuilding mode can be surprisingly effective on its own, but also, blue gets counterspells. You can reset permanents back into people's hands with your bounce and watch their controllers squirm as you threaten to counter them when they make their way back down to the board. Red gets a lot of clunky board wipes, but Blasphemous Act is always a powerhouse that not only cleanses creatures, but also usually only costs 1 red mana. This ensures you're the first person to rebuild. Other options for creatures include Mizium Mortars and Delayed Blast Fireball, both dealing tons of damage to specifically your opponent's creatures. They won't always get everything, but they're still pretty solid and they're one-sided. Continuing this asymmetry trend, red also gets Ansrog's Rampage as well as Vandal Blast, both of them allowing you to crush artifacts that threaten to lock you out of the game without accidentally stepping on your own. Alright, there's no way around this. Green struggles here. Azuri's Predation is decent, but expensive for what it is. Bane of Progress destroys all artifacts and enchantments, but outside of these, options are kind of limited. They have very specific sweepers that either hit all enchantments or all artifacts, but that's not usually good enough and none of the options exile all. Oftentimes mono green decks will just forget about board wipes in favor of trying to race the other players for this reason. But there's always the color that isn't a color. Ironically, some of the best color-strapped options are simply colorless. Nevinyrral's Disc is incredible. It hits most things, it's only 4 mana, and if you want to be a bastard, you can give it indestructible and rule the board with an Iron Fist, since it doesn't sacrifice itself to activate. Sure, it takes a turn to untap, but there are ways around that. And, for a Wrath this effective in colorless, that's a small cost. If you like the game of holding your finger on the button, Oblivion Stone lets you decide each turn whether to blow up the board or choose something to survive the inevitable apocalypse when it does come eventually. The tension these cards bring into the atmosphere is always electric. Boom Pile is for the impatient. It's the same mana cost as Nevinyrral's Disc, but enters untapped instead. But you have to flip a coin and win the flip to get the effect. If you fail, you'll have to wait until untapped to try again. Now, the consensus is that you should be running somewhere around 2 to 4 board wipes, but there are reasons to go above or below this. If you're playing a deck that commits incredibly hard to the board, but you're not in the colors to get the very efficient and powerful one-sided board wipe effects, you might want to cut down on some board wipes. On the other hand, you may be looking to build around a commander who loves big death triggers, but I would still caution against playing too many board wipes. As much as I love these cards, and I do love them, resetting the game can sour the experience for some players. The first time, you might be a hero, but around the 5th or 6th sweeper you play in a game, you're going to be getting shoved into a locker. There's an argument that punishing greedy, permanent-based strategies is healthy, and an overcommittal to the board needs an answer. But unfortunately, not everything healthy is beloved. To some, board wipes are the broccoli of Magic. Healthy? Yes. Needed? Probably. But hated all the same. I hope I've given you some variety and direction to start looking in when identifying what makes a board wipe worth a slot in your deck. I'm sure there are 1,000 different intricacies I missed and tons of great board wipes out there that you'd love to share, so feel free to discuss them in the comments where I'm going to be joining in. Who knows? Maybe together we'll learn to enjoy this game's cataclysmic broccoli.